the price of crude oil continues to fall as the commodity, which peaked at more than 130 per barrel in March 2022, has given up all the gains triggered by Russia's war on Ukraine, falling to around $94 a barrel. If this continues, prices of petroleum products on the local market will see the biggest reduction in the next pricing window on August 15th. But according to researcher with the Institute for Energy Security, Fritz Moses, this significant reduction may not be realized due to the cedi's continuous depreciation against the dollar. He spoke on the marketplace.
Well, of course, like I said earlier, I mean, what we are seeing is the global economic recession that many U.S. economists prefer we don't see, and that we are anticipating. We see how the economies around the world, in U.S., China, in UK, are all facing a downturn in economic activities with inflation rising, and how that would affect demand. We see in U.S. especially, there's been a decline in consumption of gasoline, that's petrol. The API, that's American Petroleum Institute, reported an excess of 4 million barrels of gasoline inventory recorded in just the last ended month of July. And so it points to the fears of analysts and traders that demand certainly is falling. We are seeing, however, in Europe, although we are seeing a fall in demand for oil, and gas especially, the focus is now on oils. And so, whereas gas demand is falling in Europe, we are seeing a shift to oil demand. Countries like Germany are increasing their reliance on oil-powered plants or units to meet up the energy demands. Also, of course, you see how in Europe currently they've been able to reduce their reliance on Russia's gas by some 50% and increase their LNG imports by some 100%, I should say, from 70% of their total imports to about 39% there. Of course, imports coming in from Algeria, Azerbaijan, is what's accounting for these increments. So the current economic situation, although not very favorable for the oil market, it's for oil traders and big oil corporations, IOCs. For consumers, it's a good thing because we continue to see, and of course we anticipate that to the end of this year, you'll be seeing a dwindling oil prices. We may see prices come lower than the $90 per barrel, hopefully even before the first half of August ends. If that should be the case, then
okay,
that we will continue to see. We may see prices at the various points marginally reduce, but depending on the situation of the local currency against the US dollar.
Joining us via Zoom with more is petroleum strategist Dr. Yusuf Suleiman. Hello, sir. Thank you so much for your time. Does this decline have anything to do with OPEC's announcement of a quota hike? And what's the reason for the decline we are witnessing now?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good afternoon to you, and good afternoon to our cherished viewers out there. Yes, indeed, this is certainly going to be a bit of a refresher, or a bit of a good news to the downstream side, because hitherto what we have seen is that once the downstream side, the upstream side is gathering momentum with oil prices within the 3-digit figure, that is 100 plus. The downstream side is always going to be something going to be very hot, and that's how come we have most of the pumps, globally actually going very, very high, in Ghana, not an exception. Now, this trend, is this a trend that has to do with OPEC plus cuts? Yes, it has everything to do with that, though I will call this a bit of a sentimental drop, or a bit of a speculative drop. When I say speculative drop, it means that a drop that is not very certain. We need to give it some time frame to be able to see the impact of OPEC. And usually before every OPEC meeting, we do have this kind of trend coming up where we do have a lot of uncertainties. Nobody knew how the meeting is going to span out. So after the meeting, before the meeting, actually, it dropped. Brent, which is our main benchmark, dropped around 94. And as we speak now, it started climbing gradually again, though marginally. Now we have Brent around 95 to 96. So, and the trend is actually going up again. So that's what I'm saying. It's very early days here, to be able to tell how much impact will this be. We just have to give it some time. And like my earlier colleague mentioned, our case is a bit dicey because we have a lot of variables that are coming to play to be able to determine what the consumer pays at the pump. So even if probably the pumps, the global market is dropping and our exchange rate is not doing well, we might not have that much significant impact at the pumps. However, I think it's better to give it time to see how this will, this will impact the downstream side. Yeah.
But is this downstream things sustainable? The downward trend, so, is it sustainable?
Yes, that's an interesting one. Nobody will stick the neck out and tell you that these prices are going to go down continuously like that. It's not going to happen. It may not happen. It's going to. We're going to give it some time. And I'm saying that because if you look at, the factors that are keeping the oil price as it is now, the downstream the downward in the downstream will only sustain if we have a very much good control on the upstream. Bear in mind, what keeps the downstream from going up, from going down, is because of the global prices, apart from our exchange rate. I don't want to say that exchange rate, let's say we'll hold exchange rate, we'll hold taxes. Then we'll talk about the global oil prices. So what is keeping global oil prices are three things. Number one, the rate at which the economies are opening. It has opened to the extent that we hadn't had that much of investment going to the downstream side, upstream side to beef up investment. So the whole thing about the upstream, why the upstream is burning out and we still not to be able to control it, is because of the quantum decrease in the kind of investment after the COVID. Investment hasn't gone back. And let me just give you a brief history on this, why it is very dicey to tell. If you watch closely, let's say first quarter of 2020, we had the market collapse. And the market collapsed because COVID was just coming. The market collapsed with even WTI going to negatives. So OPEC came together and said, okay, let's make some supply cuts. So they took about 10% of global supply out of the basket. That was about 9.7 million, barrels of oil per stream day. That was huge. So that kind of ration has been there, and that amount of oil hasn't gone back to the market. It is just this month, the end of this month, that kind of ration is ending. So yes, a lot of people were expecting that OPEC would have gone like a quantum leap. But of 100,000 barrels of oil increment to the global basket, I think it's not something that is going to have impact on the downstream side. So yes, it is difficult to tell at this moment whether this downward trend will sustain. It will only sustain when we have robust investment coming back to the global oil community, where we have investment coming back to the upstream, and we invest more into the upstream to channel more oil. And then when also OPEC members, especially Saudi Arabia and UAE, if Saudi Arabia and UAE can beef up, because they are the only people with a credible capability to be able to add up to the global basket. If these two players are not able to add anything to the global basket, I'm afraid that we may still see high prices, at the downstream side, at the upstream side, and that will automatically impact the downstream, yeah.
But with regards to projections, what are we looking at in the coming days?
Yeah, so in the coming days, once the downstream side, the upstream side sustain, let's say if you have it below the 3-digit figure, and we have some bit of stability within the exchange rate, then there's nothing else to keep the oil price, there's nothing else to keep the downstream from coming down. So my expectation is that if you are lucky enough, the downstream will come below 10, but it's not a certainty. Like I mentioned, it's a caveat. Once the upstream is not very stable, and remember, the upstream is not very stable because the factors that I talked about, that is keeping this upstream prices as well. The factors are still right. The factors are still very much right. We haven't had a quick resolution to Russian crisis. The only thing I can bet my prediction on is if we have a very quick resolution to Russian crisis, where the supply chain bottlenecks are the bottleneck. The bottlenecks within the supply chain that we have, if we solve it, and then we can have a bit of certainty within the Russian supply to the global basket, then we can say that, okay, this price at the upstream will stay around 95. But as I said, as I speak to you now, yesterday it was 94, today again it is 95. So we just need to, the stability of it will depend solely on two things. The stability or the volatility, how much the stability will be at the upstream, whether we can have it at 95 or below 3-digit figure for a period of time, for an elongated period of time. That's number one. Number two, also, whether we can have a bit of stability within our exchange rate. If any of these two things don't hold, so I don't think the downstream is going to be, the downward trend is going to sustain. But we hope that it will sustain because, there are some positive signs. right now, I think Europe is being impacted so much because of these sanctions and then the counter sanctions that Russia is also placing. So I think those kind of bottlenecks have been relieved, and I think Russia now, oil from Russia may possibly go into the market freely. I'm just saying that it's a possibility. And if that becomes a possibility, I think we might see more downstream coming down. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was petroleum strategist Dr. Yusuf Suleimana.